So Dr. Arielle Schwartz is a licensed clinical psychologist, certified complex trauma professional, and Kripalu, yoga teacher and in private practice in Boulder, Colorado. She is internationally sought out teacher, leading voice in the healing of PTSD and complex trauma. Dr. Schwartz is the author of 6 books, including the Complex PTSD Workbook, Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma, and the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook. She's dedicated to offering informational mental health and wellness updates through her writing, public speaking, social media presence, and blog. She believes in the journey of trauma recovery is an awakening of the spiritual heart, which is so beautiful. And our topic today is therapeutic yoga for trauma. Arielle, a long time no see.
I know. So good to see you again. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Oh yeah, I'm just so pleased that you chose to be with us today. It's such an honor.
Lovely. And hello everybody who's here with us. It's so nice to see your faces. Thank you. And whether you're laying on your floor, that looks so comfortable, and whether you're sitting up, you're welcome as you are. Really just make yourself comfortable. I'm going to mostly be sharing just some of the kind of theory and nuggets of the therapeutic yoga for trauma model that I teach, and that forms the basis of that particular book. But it will have little mindfulness and embodiment opportunities as part of this as well. And you can opt in or opt out as is right for you today. So as Greg mentioned, we met many years ago at Naropa. I'm still here in Boulder, Colorado. I am both a somatic therapist and also a yoga teacher here. And when the pandemic began, all my yoga teaching went online, as was true for a lot of folks. And it's actually stayed that way. And it's become a really meaningful experience because it's allowed us to connect from our own homes, as we're doing here, our own spaces, and join in embodiment together from wherever we are. So it's become a real international community. And I think that it's helped profoundly to reduce the degree of isolation and a sense that we can be a moving body together, right? That we can move and breathe and feel that we're not so alone in all that we're processing in the world right now. I had a unique experience this morning, which was to join a group. It was a group that brought me in to teach in Italy. However, they opened up the training to those impacted by the earthquake. And so primarily mental health professionals that were serving the mental health community of those impacted by the earthquake. And so it was simultaneous translation into Turkish as well as Italian. And the experience, once again, of being able to connect together and breathe together around something that is enormous like that, right? The recognition that when we're looking at something like 40,000 lives lost, the brain cannot fathom that, and any one person alone cannot hold that kind of grief. But when we're connecting together and breathing together and feeling the woven fabric that gets created through community, that actually is one of the essential elements of the therapeutic yoga model. But also what I feel is essential around conscious embodiment is that it goes beyond the interior self into that which connects us and joins us as people. So I have really just been dedicating all of the trauma talks that I'm doing right now to those impacted by the earthquake, and to know that as we breathe together and sit together, that we can in some ways offer just a small amount of repair to a rupture that feels so significant in our world. So thank you for joining me in that intention. And with that said, I would love to invite you to take a moment just to notice your own interior. Whether you want to close your eyes or not is up to you, but just allowing yourself to be present with what's in your heart, And also, as you go through this day of learning and breathing and becoming, what in this moment do you need to help you to be most present and open to this short time that we have together? And support, really feeling whether that's the support of your chair or the support of the floor beneath you or your bed, right? Just to feel that there is something that has your back, that you don't have to only be aware of the front body, but really sensing that we can exhale and feel that something larger than us has our backs. Yeah. And from that sense of ground beneath you and support behind you, from there, what allows you to uplift? What intention drives you or opens you to share your gifts with the world? To extend from your heart, from the ground of support and the earth beneath you. Lovely. And so you might even ask yourself, what is your intention around being here? What are you showing up for? And what is it that you hope to take away from this time that we have? One of the key elements of working with the therapeutic yoga for trauma is also an applied polyvagal theory model. And if you're not already familiar with polyvagal theory, I'll share just a little bit about what that means and why that's essential to this. So we work with an understanding that the vagus nerve is kind of like an inner soul light. It's a very profound cranial nerve that connects brain and body and heart and breath. So if we think about our connection to inspiration or spiritus, right, respiration, we have the breath. When we think about courage and heartfulness, we have the heart. When we explore how the vagus nerve connects everything from our digestive organs, how we process the world, how we digest not only our food, but our life events, and also recognize that some life events are not digestible. The vagus nerve gives us feedback. It connects this whole interior up to the conscious reflective brain, to our mind, that allows us to tune in and sense what might be happening inside. And when we're in tune or in touch with that interior, we're better able to take care of ourselves and also offer our care out to others. So it's a listening practice as much as a movement or breath-focused practice, that we're really paying attention to what is this interior. When we look at polyvagal theory, the work of Dr. Stephen Porges, we learned that the vagus nerve has evolutionary branches or circuits that have different functions in themselves. The circuit that goes below the diaphragm serves that rest and digest portion of our parasympathetic nervous system when we feel safe. It lets us immobilize in the context of safety, and it deeply nourishes our digestive organs. But we also see that when we don't feel safe, this lower portion of the vagus nerve functions in a different way. It takes us more into a collapse or a withdrawal or a shutdown, sometimes even a feeling of being hopeless, helpless, or depressed. And if you or someone you love is in that shutdown response, we learn that part of the journey of healing is to connect into that upper pathway of the vagus nerve, which brings us back to the heart, which allows us to have compassion for the parts of us that can be deeply shut down, and to hold with the deepest care the part that can feel exhausted sometimes, like I've got nothing left to give. And we just love that part so deeply. We give that part a home, or we cocoon that in a place where it can be safely held until we have the energy to reemerge into the world. The upper pathway of the vagus nerve is what we call the social engagement system. And it's more recently evolved, and it moves upward not only into heart and lungs, but into our larynx and pharynx in the throat. So it lets us express ourselves in the world, how we're feeling, comes through our voice tone. And then the vagus nerve travels into the inner ear so that we can receive the sounds of the people around us, our loved ones. We can experience the soothing tones that allow us to connect. And we express through our eyes. So the vagus nerve connects into the muscles around the mouth and face and allows our facial expression to be a heart connection, right? We allow ourselves to be in tune and congruent with that internal expression or knowing or authentic self, and bring that out into the world. And that too can sometimes be interfered with. We've found ways in life to not feel so safe. Life has not been always so safe. The world is full of threats. And so sometimes we shut down in that social connectedness and we withdraw. So part of what we learn to do is to realign and reconnect and learn how to be back in connection. And it's what I do appreciate about, I have you all in gallery for the moment. So, those of you with your cameras on, it allows us to have a moment of face-to-face and connection, even from afar, right? We can sense and feel each other. Thank you. Even with your towel on your head, it's so lovely. I got your waves. Thank you. It's nice to feel connected. It's meaningful, right? Yeah.
Hey, Arielle, could you tell us how you got interested in this work?
So glad to. There's probably a lot of different variations to that story. So I'll start with a few personal layers to it, and then more of the kind of professional layers. Personally, I chose to go do my yoga teacher training the year before I arrived at Naropa. I'll give a location on a timeline for a moment. This was in 1996, and I went to do my my yoga teacher training at Kripalu, and I was 23, and I was in a state of chronic flight, but I didn't know it. And the chronic flight in me, that pattern was a restlessness and a discomfort with slowing down, a discomfort with being still, because underneath that, there was trauma in my own history, both my own personal family history, and then also generationally, there's a tremendous amount of trauma that goes back for generations. Even my own family fleeing Kiev in the late 1800s as Jewish families were being placed in pogroms. So there's, I could go on in that journey, but I'll keep it to that for now. And so the flight pattern in my body was just this constant buzz. And the experience of going into this yoga training and these opportunities to practice mindfulness and slowing down and stillness and yoga nidra was opening up the interior for me of a felt sense that was a little scary. And I knew that this journey of somatics was something that I needed to heal, because for me as a person, I somaticized a lot. And what I mean by that is, growing up in a family where I didn't feel safe, it manifested for me in things like asthma and other respiratory distress and digestive distress and somatic tension patterns that were profoundly painful. And so being someone where the body keeps the score, this idea that the body is telling the story, or even in sometimes saying no, I chose to study somatics to try and heal myself, but also to know that that was the path of healing that I wanted to be able to offer for others as well. And then polyvagal theory came into the mix a bit later. And it wasn't until probably 10 years after I had graduated with my master's, and I at that time went back and got a PhD in clinical psychology, and was really doing a much deeper dive into neuroscience. And when I first met Dr. Stephen Porges, which was about 2012, a big light bulb went off for me, where I was able to understand that flight response, right? The part of me that is in go, go, go. But what that was actually protecting me from was also an underlying collapse that was actually more frightening to feel. And the experience of touching in my own nervous system, where the imbalances have been, but also learning a path to finding greater nervous system regulation through embodiment, has really become the central nature of my work. So with that information, with a little bit of that, I would love to just invite all of us for a moment to just tune into your body. How is your body responding to this naming of these different nervous system states, whether it's being in that sympathetic fight or flight, or a shutdown and collapse? And what resonates for you, and how does your body need to just pause and integrate this movement that I'm doing? Where probably many of us are familiar with some idea of what pandicular motion is, but it's just that full body yawn. It's a mind-body reset that allows you to really be guided by your sensations, to know how to come back once again to the frontal lobes of our brain. We're kind of pressing a reset button on the brainstem for a moment through movement and breath. Yeah, good, beautiful. And even just those little movement and body awareness and breath breaks, they're so essential, because in our world, we can disconnect pretty easily. It's just a natural part of being human. There's, strengths to that, and there's also detriments. So we take a moment of that pause. And with the polyvagal theory, it also has taught me a lot about what vagal toning offers to our nervous system. So what is vagal toning? It's this idea that we can naturally stimulate the vagus nerve in ways that help to light up that body-brain connection. Just like that pandicular motion is, refreshing and sending an increased blood flow into the brainstem, when we do vagal toning, we're doing some similar actions. So what does that mean? What does it mean to tone the vagus nerve or stimulate the vagus nerve? It means that we are interacting with how the vagus nerve travels through the body, and we're basically taking hold of that autonomic nervous system with a little bit more conscious, volitional, interactive process. So, for example, one of the most direct ways to change the state of the autonomic nervous system is through the breath. And recall that the vagus nerve travels through heart and lungs. And when we find a balanced breathing pattern, like a nice rhythmic inhale and exhale, we're sending signals via the lungs and heart up to the brainstem that says, I'm safe enough now. Right? We're coming out of that fight, flight breath, right? The rapid, shorter breath cycles into a longer rhythmic flow. And it's an immediate mind-body connection reset. So you might try that for yourself. When I'm talking, I go a little bit faster, but, even if we pause together for just 2 breaths with a slower rhythmic 4-count inhale and 4-count exhale, and I'll let you find your own count. And we can begin to notice the shift, right? That really pregnant pause of what happens when we consciously breathe and when we do so together. And other ways that we can interact with this autonomic nervous system we're equipped with are pressure points. For example, in the ears, in the tragus is a very small cartilage in front of each ear. And inside of the ear, the concha of the ear, which is considered to have 100% vagal fibers. So a little bit of self-massage in these areas increases blood flow and is waking up that connection. So I want to remind you that waking up the body-mind connection isn't always going to be, I feel great, right? We're waking up to what is. So we will attune even sometimes to where there's discomfort or grief or pain. But once we feel what is and what is true, then we can respond to that. What does that need, that feeling or that pain or that grief? What is that needing from you or from us interpersonally? Yeah. Debbie, you write in, sometimes my heart beats fast, really fast when I have a long inhalation and exhalation. I'd be curious about it, right? Like what we often will see is that the initial process of coming back to breath will lead to a change. And certainly the inhalation is generally associated with having an increase of a heartbeat, and that the exhalation hopefully will help to slow it back down. But, using some tools, for me, my iWatch will measure my heartbeat. And we have, different tools where we can track that. We might begin to notice that as we find that sweet spot of the breath, we can work with creating a ideal heart rate variability response for ourselves. And we can track that also through apps on our phone, where I can use a breathing app and it will track that right into my phone and give me some feedback. Or we can use other breath-based biofeedback tools to get to know this about ourselves. So Kim writes in, by default breathing, is the exhale supposed to be longer than the inhale? So generally when I'm teaching breathing practices, I'll start with what's called samavriti, which in Sanskrit just stands for the balanced breath. Sama means same, and vriti is the movement of the breath. So we start with the most basic breathing pattern, which you can read a whole lot about, by the way, in James Nestor's book called Breath. And what we find is that there's a beautiful reset. Yeah, it's a great book, isn't it, Geraldine? It's a beautiful breathing pattern where we can catch what we call coherence or resonance breathing, which is generally to slow the breath down to about a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale, which will get your breath to about 5 or 6 breaths per minute instead of the typical 10 to 13. Just that is significant. And Kim, I'm so glad you're here and you asked that question. From there, we can begin to experiment. Maybe we experiment with lengthening the exhale as compared to the inhale. So now every exhale, which was going to emphasize the parasympathetic system, is going to give more weight to that parasympathetic side. So if you're keyed up and you want more of a parasympathetic response, you can even double your exhale as compared to your inhale. 4 count in, 8 count out, or 6 count out, whatever you're comfortable with. And so you're interacting with your nervous system that way. Yeah. And again, you can experiment with that here again on your own. And you know, it's fun to have a few of you here who are regular Saturday morning yoga students with me, and so you know what the practice looks and feels like. I'll share just thanks, Kim. I'll share just a few more principles of the whole model. Of course, can read about it in my book or join us for a Saturday class, which you can sign up for on my website. But the whole model starts with safety first. Right? Once we feel safe enough in the here and now, we can begin to unwind the impact of traumatic events. Okay? And if we're not safe enough in the here and now, that's really becomes our goal, is how do we cultivate that? And then from there, we can explore through some of these practices, what are the small practices that we can integrate that help us feel like we have more choice and control about the state of our nervous system, whether that's through vagal toning or breathing or movement. And we're building what I refer to as nervous system flexibility, where we learn to not only not get stuck in just one nervous system state, so I'm not stuck in just sympathetic or a shut down parasympathetic, but I have more capacity to move fluidly and flexibly between different nervous system states. And over time, we can grow our capacity to handle more. So there's obviously plenty more I could say on this topic, but I'm recognizing our time. And Greg, I want to thank you again for inviting me to be here with all of you.
Oh,